Hello, and welcome to Greet the Week. I am Mona Duncan, and here with my co-host Jan Moray, and we have some of our regulars watching. That's always nice, and we welcome those of you that will be watching later. And so, whenever our friends in California is watching later, we've gotten a notice that because of the fires there, they are cutting back on rolling blackouts on the electricity to not spark more unnecessary fires, and won't be with us today, so we miss you. And Jan has chosen our topic, and today it is looking at the fact of how that when we experience things, our body keeps a record of them. And whenever it's very traumatic, it becomes the way our body keeps it and stores is becomes a post-traumatic disorder. And there's a lot of truth to that, and we're not to make light of it at all. But it is to look at the fact that through all of those difficulties, it can be post-traumatic growth instead of a disorder. So Jan, share with us what your thoughts are for today.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't think there's a single person on this planet who hasn't experienced some trauma sometime in their life. Of course, traumas vary in intensity from being, very mild to very major. But and different people respond to them in different ways. What might be very traumatic for you might not be traumatic at all for me. And so, why the difference? Do we have a choice in how we respond and how we carry on that trauma through the rest of our life? Are there things that we can do? And then, as I'm starting on this introduction, as we were talking before we started, I realized today is Pearl Harbor Day, the day that is the 79th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and that certainly was a traumatic event in the world, mainly for people in the United States. But how did people respond to that? Some people became more loyal and more patriotic and wanted to keep moving, stand up against the Japanese. Of course, it brought us into a war, which there's a lot of pros and cons about that. But people survived it, and people were affected in different ways. And so, what makes somebody respond to something like that in a positive manner to grow from the experience? And then I also think about just experiences in our lives and in personal growth. Do we have to go through some kind of a traumatic experience or an unpleasant experience in order to really grow and to move forward? Because if everything just goes the way we want it to go, do we really learn from it? Do we become stronger emotionally? So that's a lot of stuff to throw out there. So let's just kind of pick it apart and see where we go from here. So,
Right. I watched a NCIS, and it was just the Arizona.
okay.
And that was the topic of it. And they were, I'm not going into it was about Pearl Harbor Day, and a young man had enlisted using his brother's birth certificate.
So he made it older.
He was like 16 years old.
Okay.
And he was at Pearl Harbor, and he was there whenever the bombing happened. And anyway, he was old, and he was wanting when he died, he wanted to be cremated and his ashes there at Pearl Harbor in the memorial. And the NCIS, they couldn't believe him because they didn't have any concrete evidence. They have to have this evidence. We couldn't just say, well, you were there. And anyway, finally they did prove the fact that he was there. As a matter of fact, he even had a piece of the shrapnel in his arm that had lived with him forever. But anyway, at the very ending, the guy who is Mark Hammond was talking to his staff, and he said, I need to tell you something, because he was taking the ashes to Pearl Harbor, and to be there, be the bodyguard that was protecting the ashes, and then to be there for the ceremony and to making sure that it was put in place. Anyway, he was telling me, he says, I need to tell you something about the guy, I forget his name. He said, but it's also about me. He said that whenever he was in the wars that he was in himself, that whenever it was time to come home, he was afraid he couldn't go home because he was only a half a person, and how his family wouldn't recognize the who had left whenever he left, who he was
Okay.
then,
Okay.
as to who he was when he came home. And he was talking about, he said, there's something about your comrades in that time of trauma that you realize that someone else would give their own life in order to save yours, and you would do the same thing. And then he went on to say that it shouldn't take a war to learn something so simple.
Right. Right. But
And that
sometimes
is
that's what it takes to kind of make you realize what's going on and what's really happening.
that in those traumas, as we can look at the fact that we have to be there, not only for ourselves, we have to be there for one another.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
just have to be there for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that it shouldn't take something so traumatic that when we really look at it to simplify life. Because maybe we are doing the best we can.
Well, I like to think that we are until something hits us that proves that we're not, that helps us to understand that we're not, or to change our thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when those traumas are there, is to begin to see things from a little different light.
Mm-hmm.
That instead of all the shadow being cast to it, to put a little light where we can realize that tomorrow is another day, and that
Right.
things
Right.
are always capable of changing.
Yeah. And the stories of, Pearl Harbor, of all the other military people that came to the assistance of the USS Arizona to try to save people. It's just very heartwarming. And I don't know, have you ever been to Pearl Harbor, to the memorial?
I haven't.
It is for me anyway. I've been twice, and it's just so emotionally touching. I mean, because they've got, I mean, it's not much to it. It's the sunken ship is underneath it, and there's just this little bridge kind of that goes over it, and on the wall there's a list of all the people who died on that day, but you can still see air, just little bubbles of air coming up from the ship.
Wow.
And it's just like, I mean, there's still some life, something that was there at the time of the sinking that are still bubbling up to the surface. At least to me, it was very moving. But that had to have influenced a lot of people's lives. The family members, they lost people on that ship, and what were their lives like afterwards? And and then the people who were actually there, I'm sure some of them were never able to recover from that, and others were able to live really strong lives, after that. And which side do you want to be? And and then, I mean, not to belittle anything that happens to you, but there's in the grand scheme of things, there are always things that are a lot more severe than anything I've gone through. I'll speak for myself here, but yet, there are times when you feel like this is the most terrible thing that's ever happened to you, but you can either allow it to change your life in a negative way or a positive way. And I think that's where Dr. Glasser's teachings come in, is we do get to choose on how we respond to these things that happen to us. We can change our lives for the better. We can choose to think that this is the most terrible thing that's ever happened to us. But which side do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the side that is scarred for the rest of your life, or do you want to be the one who was able to overcome, one of Mona's words, and to grow from it and to live, have more meaning in your life, more purpose? Maybe there's some things that you can do to help others, to keep others from having to go through the same thing, or to help others when they are experiencing that same thing.
Yeah. So that distress, to give it, well, and the book, The Greatest Generation, and to realize that there is something that is happening. Yes, it's over there. It's over there, but it's something that's happening to a fellow human being.
Yeah.
And so let's do what we can to help our neighbor.
Yes.
And as we can begin to do that and realize, that many people were wounded. I mean, innocent. I was talking about the innocent person. Well, I guess, anyway, it sounds like going there is not only very somber, but it's a very sacred place to go and to remember, and how much we need to remember. And you know how I am with words. And I think of remembering, that little re is like to connect, so that we can member again with each other.
Yeah.
And a lot of that does happen with turning that distress into growth.
Right.
Is that as we remember with one another and have that camaraderie, that not to matter of fact, most of those in the Greatest Generation don't even want to talk about what they went through.
Right.
Because, and it's more of a humility than a pride thing. It's because
And those memories are hard, are tough, and uncomfortable sometimes to bring up. But being able to do so, especially in the presence of others who have been through something similar, does help to heal and to realize, yeah, we went through a lot of difficult times, but we made it. we did it. We're here now. We're still around, and we learned. Like what you said, the guy who came back was a different person from when he left. I mean, it definitely teaches a lesson and gives you something to think about, and to really think about life and what you want out of life, and what are your goals, and which direction you want to go, and just a lot of things to think about. And sometimes it takes stuff like that to shake us up and say, let's reevaluate here, or let's just evaluate for the first time, and see whether we're headed in the direction that we want to be. Or maybe I want to do some things differently. I would feel better about myself if I were to do something differently.
Right. And I was just thinking of heard this little podcast. It was of Barack Obama whenever he was thinking about the possibility of running for president in his book, that he's just come out. And in the podcast, he was talking about the fact that he was thinking about, well, maybe someday, and he was, throw my hat in the ring to become the president of the United States and so forth, that he thought, well, I need at least 10 more years to learn and grow and all this. And that Ted Kennedy was talking with him, and he made the comment, I didn't write it down, but it was so powerful. It said, there is never, you do not choose the right time. Time chooses you.
Yeah.
And the person that was doing the podcast was looking at the fact of the world in general, that time that we do not, the pandemic chose us.
Hmm.
And so, or all of the, as we've talked about before, all the conditions were met for it to happen. All of the conditions were met.
Yeah.
And it's, if we can ever look back to see, well, could it have been seen previously? Well, yeah, in hindsight is always better than foresight. And in hindsight, you can see how things could have been prevented. But if it wasn't, it's time to look at it is what it is, and how do we grow from here? And how do we become stronger as a people that touches the whole world? That touches not only our neighbor, not only the one that we are working with, the individual, but that, because there's an aura, you can, have you ever had chills running up and down your spine because you knew something was there that you needed to be
Oh,
watching
yes.
out for?
It's scary. It's scary. Yes. Yes. Yeah. But
And it's,
talking about the thing of everything had to be just perfect for it to happen, and it chooses you. I mean, that's something I remember hearing long time ago, that any day that you go, you could be in a car accident, but you're not,
exactly.
because not everything is right in place. But you think about the things that, well, if I hadn't seen that car over here, or this guy hadn't decided to make a sudden turn, or whatever, all these things come together. And so I notice now, maybe it's because I'm getting older, that I notice some of the things that happen in my life that go, ooh, that in the wrong set of conditions, I could have fallen, I could have tripped, I could have really gotten hurt. And so you realize that these things go on every day. And then I've been very fortunate that I haven't had an accident, and haven't been hurt, because not everything was quite in place yet. And so when everything is in place and the traumatic event happens, okay, it was destined to happen, because everything just kind of came together. So what am I supposed to learn from this? What's this supposed to do for me?
Yeah, and even in those near misses,
Yeah,
and then you're very
yeah.
thankful. I'm so thankful it didn't happen because it was a near miss. All of that condition was met for it to be a near
Right, to be
miss.
I live a very charmed life, because
Yes.
I'm noticing more and more near misses these days. And it's like, have these always, is it always been like that?
Well, and it has been. And that's why part of waking up, I mean, being really awake. And, I don't know the first time I ever heard that of waking up, being awake. And I thought, well, how stupid can you be? I'm awake, meaning I'm not asleep. But yet we are asleep. We are so bound by only our the me and my, until we begin to deliberately, on purpose, expand our horizons, to see how that those things, those little things that seem like nothing, that we just dismiss. As wanting a perfect race. I mean, and then the atomic bomb, and then
Mm,
all of those things that went together, that was a planning to destroy people.
yeah.
And there was some righteous people a part of that evil,
Hmm.
because it's in all of us. Every single solitary one of us has that. We're both, and we are the evil and we are the godly. We are the righteous. We are the good. But which one are we going to listen to, and which one are we going to feed? And when we have been around those and have been traumatized by those situations, whether it is in the domestic violence at home, whether it is the domestic violence in this world, whether it's gang members, whether it's bullying, whatever it is, whenever we are confronted by those evils, it's being thankful, first of all, that maybe it wasn't growing in our heart to the point of, I don't know. I mean, Are there answers? There are. There's as many answers as there are people in the
Well,
world,
exactly.
maybe.
That's what I was thinking. And how do you know which answer is the right one for you?
Yeah, and you don't. And I really love to just live in the mystery. That whenever I think I have an answer to something, I don't want to claim it as that, because it may just be a little bitty inkling of that
Yeah,
needs to be nurtured and grow more.
yeah,
And I would starve it if I just accepted that as the answer.
right.
And I don't want to starve it. I want to let it grow and see what it blooms into.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because once you starve things, they don't disappear. They don't go away. They're still there. But you're not addressing it.
Yeah.
And Sharon just sent me a note saying, how does resiliency play in this?
And
And
see
I,
if it turns into something that is beautiful. But I mean, it goes back to the fact that thorns are found on the rose's stem.
right.
And what is more beautiful than a rose and one of the most loved plants? But you have to treat it carefully.
Right, right.
And you even have to wear some protective gear to be around roses.
Yeah. And
And
to know that bad things happen, things that we don't expect, that we don't want, they happen. And I think it is people who are more resilient. And what does that mean? Maybe Mona can elaborate on that. Are the ones who will, prevail, because it's like, I'm not going to allow this to get me down. I'm not going to allow this to ruin my life. I'm going to. I've got too much to live for, so let's make the best of it, and let's keep moving forward, and see where we go from there. I mean, it's not to just act like it didn't happen. I think it's important to process that and talk it through and find others who've been through what you've been through. But to say that, I'm going to validate that it happened, but I'm not going to allow it to consume me. I'm not going to allow it to take over and to continue push me down that negative track. Um,
right. And to always realize that there are others that have gone through terrible things like that have come out on a better side.
right. And I want to
And
be one
if
of those people.
yeah, and if one did it, guess what? That set a standard
Yes, that's a
that others
precedent there.
can too.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's looking for a good, and sometimes just having enough strength within yourself to the, well, maybe nobody ever has, but I'll be the one that does.
Right. You can be the first.
Because what we tell ourselves has it it may not be the exact all end all, but it certainly has a lot to do with what the actuality is.
Yeah.
And it's looking at, and as you can begin to be enlightened, as you can begin to be enheartened, as you can begin to be have a lighter buoyancy to you, that in itself tells us that something's happening, because we are a total being, and our total being works together with all the other total beings in this world, including animals and things in the air, dust and pollens and all that kind of stuff. It all works together. But as we are built up emotionally, physically, spiritually, relationally, as we are built up, then we're not going to collapse as easily.
Right. Right.
And so it all goes back to taking care of you, because as selfish as this may sound, it's more about you than it is about them.
Well, it is. And you can't do anything about them. You can't make things better for them. The only person you can make it better for is you. And so you have to protect yourself and be around the people who help buoy you up, instead of around those that bring you down. And you have to find what things help you to stay resilient and to stay focused and to stay in a positive mindset, because nobody else can do that for you as much as they try. Even when people think that they're helping and doing things, it might not be what you need at the time.
Exactly. And so if anyone does, try to be gracious, and they don't understand if they don't understand the thing I'm trying to say, but thank you for trying.
Right. That's right. I mean, and exactly. I mean, you go, but the intent is good. The intent is to help you, and it may have missed the mark totally, and it's not helping you feel any better. but they are, to be grateful that somebody cares, because they do care about you, and they are trying, and that's something to acknowledge. But that's not what I need right now.
Yeah.
I just need my own time to figure this out, and I'll get there. I'll get there. Right now, I'm mad, I'm upset, I'm whatever, and I just need my own time to process this and to get through it. And but thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a good note to close on,
Okay.
and to realize that there's a lot of things going on in this world, and the only thing we have any control over is how we handle it. And let's use it for growth instead of to slide down that slippery slope, because it would be easy to do that. But we don't want the easy. The easy doesn't build muscle.
All right. Thank you.